regular friendly faces committed to this than 3,000. So it's fantastic to see you all joining us again. Everybody joining now. And as you join us, I'll just chit chat a bit. Welcome to Behavioural Science Club from all over the world. Our loyal regular members and new members today. And I thought just today, as we have got lots of new members recently, I thought I'd just do a really quick background maybe about the group. Just, we always presume you all know about us and you don't necessarily. We were born out of Nudgestop Behavioural Science Festival when we thought it would be a good idea to start a group to read the books of the speakers of Nudgestop. It's kind of segued since then, and it's important to Prakash and myself sort of be aware of changing trends. And with Prakash having had his Now Fest, I've just started a series of articles writing about Latin America. It's very important to both of us to try to recognize new voices, voices that aren't heard. Another thing is we had said that Tiny Habits would be our book for February. And so what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to put a few posts up in the thread to start a conversation about tiny habits. I know a lot of you love BJ Fogg, and it's a great subject to be talking about. So I'm going to get some conversation going in the thread about that book, about habits in general. So next, what I want to do is to welcome Biju to us, Biju Dominic, Chief Evangelist of Fractal, one of the most prominent players in artificial intelligence space, and CEO of FinalMile, applying behavioral economics and cognitive science to explain human behavior. And I want to tell you about something that I read in relation to Biju. Somebody posted up. I thought this was absolutely lovely and I really wanted to share it. He said, Biju Dominic was the reason I got interested in behavioral science. In 2010, he came to my college and shared the work of FinalMile. I just thought that was absolutely lovely that you'd inspired this young person at the time. So I wanted to share that with everybody. You started off in advertising. You were a speaker at Now Fest, Prakash's festival, back in October. On the future of behavioral science. So Biju, for all of the people who don't know you so well, why don't you tell us about your journey into behavioral science from when you were working in advertising, and towards the end, tell us what the heck is a chief evangelist. So over to you, Biju.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Prakash, and thank you, Louis, for inviting me to have this discussion. And yeah, I think first 18 years of my career was in the world of advertising. Possibly worked with some of the leading advertising agencies in the country, the JWTs and the Low Lintas and DDB. And also I managed to got the opportunity to work with some of the best brands those days, the Unilevers and the Pepsis and Nestle's and Reliance, and so some big and big brands that I worked with. Developed a lot of 30-second commercials and press ads for all those brands. Launched a lot of categories, like deodorant category, I think was launched, in 1995. I remember launching Rexona Deo in India. That was the first Deo to be launched in India. But I think right through these 18 years, I knew one thing, that we are spending millions and millions of dollars trying to influence human behavior. But end of the campaign, I used to go up to the brand manager and say, okay, how was last month's or last quarter's sales? And the person said, okay means it has not really moved. And when I used to discuss the same thing with my bosses in advertising, they told me, they sort of chastised me. I said, Biju, why should we be bothering about sales? Sales should be taken care of by the sales department of the client. We've got our whatever research scores showing that our commercial is, wow, whatever, I don't know, I forget what those scores are. Those scores, we achieved it, so we have done our job. But somewhere I used to feel really uncomfortable about it because I come from a middle class background, an Indian middle class home. And one of the things that is taught in India is obviously, money is very, very, precious. More so if someone else's money, if someone gives you money with a lot of trust and asks you to take care of it, you should take care of it with much more respect than you would take care of your money. And I always felt when the clients was giving me their advertising budget, they are putting a lot of trust in me. And I used to feel, to be honest, very hurt that I'm not able to really deliver what the client is actually giving me the money for, which is actually to increase the sales. So I was constantly on the lookout as to why I'm not able to do a good job. So initially, when I used to raise that question, my own bosses said, you're not practicing what has been taught you. So we have got all the models, we got all the planning tools. I think study that a bit more and then focus on it, and then you will get the answers. So they were telling me that you're not practicing the theory that has been taught to you. But when I started reading much more about what's happening in the advertising world, across the world, I realized that it's just not me who's making mistakes. The mistakes are very large. So the new product failures across the world is 90%. And even other campaigns, when he's speaking about it, I realized 70-80% of those campaigns do not actually bring in any ROI, except some Cannes awards. Forget about that. But the truth was that we were not delivering results. And then I asked myself only one question, why are the failure rates so humongous? Then I started looking at other areas, change management program. And I'm sure you all have read that HBR article, which said 70 to 90% of the change management programs across the world fail. So I realized it's just not marketing, but anything to do with human behavior. Our failure rate is, at 70 to 90%. And that was an irony for me, when every other department of an organization, supply chain, production, the finance, are all moving towards a Six Sigma level of success. Here is the departments that deal with human behavior have a Six Sigma level of failure. And then I asked myself one fundamental question. Is the problem with the practice of the theory, or the theory itself is wrong? That means the very theory that I learned in my business school and which I've been practicing for so many years, is there fundamentally, are there flaws in that? That which led me to sort of get a bit more deeper into the construct of the theory of human behavior. And I realized we started studying human behavior somewhere towards the late 19th century, early 20th century. William James, and then, behaviorism and the late 19th century, early 20th century. Obviously, Freud comes up with his theory. And so we start physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy. We've been studying for hundreds and hundreds of years, but we've been studying human behavior just for 100 years, just few less than, now just about 100 years old. And just before that, we took a fair bit of learnings from, classical economics. And that too, very conveniently, we took a lot of learnings from Adam Smith's, for example, Wealth of Nations, that speaks about a bit more of rationality and other things. And very conveniently, we forgot that Adam Smith wrote a brilliant book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, wherein he really speaks about human behavior. So I somewhere knew that, okay, then I went a bit more into the theory. Then I realized behaviorism, yes, it was spoken with a lot of gusto. 1920s, 1930s, Skinner and Pavlov and a lot of those theories were brilliant. But 1950s on, Noam Chomsky and others comes with the science of cognitive science. And cognitive science said, no, a lot of things about behaviorism is not right. Obviously, there was Freud before that. A lot of people initially had a lot of focus on Freud, and psychoanalysis was a big hit in the 1950s and, in America. But then later people said Freud is a fraud, because a lot of his theories cannot be proven scientifically. So as V.S. Ramachandran, the head of neuroscience in California University, said, there were as many psychology theories as there were psychologists. So there was behaviorism, there is psychoanalysis, there was, cognitive science, there was transaction analysis, There were individual theories like Maslow's theory. There was X and Y theory. So we had theories and theories. And so I realized that human behavior was a place where there were a lot of theories. There wasn't a single theory that was explaining all facets of human behavior. So all that we were doing is, like there is a Indian dish called khichdi, which is put all lot of things together and you get one output. And that's exactly what we were doing. So when we were trying to understand human behavior, we take some learnings from stimulus and response from behaviorism. We take some input-output scheme from cognitive science. We go and take some conscious, non-conscious from psychoanalysis. Then we go and take Maslow's theory to talk about how we progress things. I knew we were in a problem. And that is what led me to say, is there a fundamental source of human behavior? And I came across this statement by Francis Crick, who also invented, obviously, DNA, who also gave base to the whole world. And he said, all that we do, all our thoughts and all our actions are nothing but electrochemicals between our ears. And if we can understand those electrochemical reactions, we understand human behavior. That led me to the world of neuroscience. And I suddenly knew that if I understand neuroscience, I'll be able to understand human behavior. Now, that was a significant journey that took me fairly 18, 19 years. And by the time I came to the early 2000s, of course, behavioral economics was taking off because of the 2002 Nobel Prize. I started reading about that because suddenly, from what the classical economics theories and based on it, all the research methodologies I knew were failing. And behavioral economics suddenly gave me a good feel as to why we are irrational. Then I said, okay, let me combine learnings from neuroscience and also combine learnings from behavioral economics. But I also knew one thing, that it's not enough that we have theory. We should always convert those theory into interventions. So I knew I had to bring in design into it. So we combined neuroscience, behavioral economics, and design, and we brought in a completely new perspective into human behavior, which was fundamentally different from the existing psychology theories. And that we began as an organization, and I co-founded an organization in 2007 called FinalMile, which actually became where for the first time in the world we really started applying these, because I'm not too sure there were any other firms before 2007 that was applying behavioral economics and neuroscience to take care of the problems. So that's a fairly long answer to almost 25 years of my career, reaching up to founding FinalMile.
That's fantastic, Biju. It's great to hear people's stories as they have come into the subject. I'm always fascinated with that, and particularly noticed that as you were telling that story, you were explaining to us really as well almost the evolution of psychology, like you traveled through it. And we've seen now, like you said, we've seen theories sort of debunked, and we all know that behavioral science is a relatively new description of the way in which you're thinking. So do you see maybe in a period of time that there will be practices that are being done now that will be devalued, or can you see that there were things maybe that were being done 5 years ago that have already lost their value as people learn more in practice? We're very aware that it's done in the lab and needs to be then put into practice in real life. So that really interests me, the transition into real world practice.
What I see in the last few years is I think we started picking up more and more newer sciences and started getting a deeper understanding. For example, neuroscience itself, when FinalMile started in 2007, we were taking a lot of learnings from cognitive neuroscience. Whereas now that as part of Fractal, because Fractal is a very large data analytics and AI company, we realized that neuroscience, there is a whole branch of neuroscience called computational neuroscience, which really is capturing the functioning of the brain at a mathematical level. And that actually combines very well with the data. And so we are actually now combining computational neuroscience and AI to really speak about, to understand human behavior. So what I see is a lot of new progress with more and more new sciences coming together. And as you rightly said, the behavioral science, as we call it, to me is now gaining more and more strength with new sciences coming in.
And the other thing that interests me when I talk to people who are practitioners of behavioral science, as opposed to the academic side, is that when things are being learned in academia, papers are published, and we then can read about it and we can learn about those developments. Whereas when people are practicing on their own, where can we go then to learn what you are learning? What is there that we could do, or what could be developed so that what you're learning can be shared? It's kept privately, as it were, because obviously you've got clients, you have to get their permission to say, which is different again from academia. But that interests me as to how can behavioral scientists, now it's becoming so much more of an applied subject, how can they share what they're learning and develop this on?
First of all, I think I'll always feel uncomfortable about this division between academia and practice. I am always grateful for the academicians and theoreticians for developing the theory. For that matter, when I met Professor Taylor, when he invited me to give few lectures in Chicago booth, he was very surprised. And that I'm talking about early 2011, 12, wherein he used to say that, Biju, I was looking for someone, who sort of, first of all, he was very surprised that someone sitting far away in India has read a lot of his old books, not was just published in 2008. And we were already putting that into practice. So he was very, very happy that his theories were being applied. And let me also really give, gratitude to these professors, because if it had not been for the theories that Professor Taylor, Kahneman, and then I'm talking about a whole lot of people in neuroscience, Antonio Damasio, V.S. Ramachandran. I can talk about, these are all professors. So what we used to do in FinalMile was to read all the books and papers which these people wrote. So much so, initially 60-70% of the time of every employee of FinalMile used to be reading all this. And if you come to FinalMile office and now Fractal office, you'll actually find there is a bookshelf in front of everyone's table. And every Monday, we have what we call Limen, which is a session where everyone comes together from across the world. And we say, what is it new that we read about human behavior? And this now we've been continuing for the last 15 years. Every Monday in the evening, we come together to discuss it. So hats off to all the theoreticians who are developing theory, because I strongly believe great practice can come only with great theory. If human behavior, as I said in the beginning, said we were failing at 70% and 90%, it was because we didn't have a theoretical foundation. We had a completely haphazard theoretical foundation with lots of multiple theories. But now that we have a very solid theory, neuroscience, behavioral economics, I think we can, the more we learn those theories, I think more we are able to practice. That's the first point. The second point, how do we share that? I think the point that you asked. I think FinalMile, we've been a bit shy about sharing because we are not good in writing papers. That's what academicians are. They do a very good job of sharing it. But over the years, what I have done was even much before, even I was developing the theory, I used to teach in a lot of business schools in India and abroad. And that's one way I share with the new students that, hey, here is a new set of science. There's also a reason why I speak to the students, because we know status quo bias. If someone has been practicing a marketing theory and focus group, the traditional theory for the last 20 years, 25 years, Now I go and tell him there is some new learning coming in from neuroscience, the behavioral economics. He'll say, yeah, great, I know Kanban and all that, but he's not going to practice because his brain is not going to allow him to accept those new information. Whereas if you speak to students, as that gentleman said, yeah, when he was in this MBA school, I spoke to him and he heard it, he'll be willing to accept this new knowledge. So I speak to a lot of students about this new science, and that is the way we disseminate about our practices to a much larger number of people around the world. And that's how we share our knowledge.
That's brilliant, Biju. I mustn't hog you anymore. I could be asking you questions myself for the whole hour. And I will just say that Gaurav is here with us, Gaurav Patel, who was the one who said that. I didn't like to say the name at the start, so I didn't know if he was with us yet, but he's here with us today. So I'm just going to hand you over to Prakash now, who's going to chat with you for a bit, and then we'll be opening up questions to the members. Thanks so much, Biju.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Biju, welcome to the group.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here, and I know it means a lot to a lot of people. Time and again, I have folks like Gaurav will ping me out here there and say, "Hey, we got to speak with Biju." And then a couple of times when I asked them why, and they're like, "Oh, because he is the reason." So I've had more than one person at different point of time ping me and say they ascribe their interest and then their eventual move into the field to you. Obviously, even Reshma at 1001, she says very, very fond of your work. Needless to say, I think very highly of your work too. And so the thing about this group of ours is we have got, and this is something which I keep on telling all our guests so that they understand the breakup of the group. It's got students who are just about in their first year degree, 18, 20-year-old. We got people who only yesterday saw the name Dan Ariely and got like, oh, there's something called the irrational mind. Then there are people who are right now pursuing their PhDs, double PhDs, people who are professors, people who are writers, authors, and running companies. So it's an entire mixed bag of folks who are a part of the group. And I just want to point out right now, we got Dwi from Jakarta right now here with us. A lot of folks from India. And then we've got VM from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia right now in this audience. All right. We got Hamza, who is from Estonia. We got Ana Savez from Mexico, Ayerwe from Peru, Sebastian Fonzer from Argentina, and then we got Steve Audit from Trinidad and Tobago, right? So if this group, right, this specific group of folks, if we today had to create the foundations of psychology, and if we assume, right, all previous psychology just like poof, vanished, how do you advise us, that we start this? Where are the gaps that you have seen? Weird psychology has become quite a big thing in the last decade. And in fact, we were lucky to have Professor Joe Henrich speak to us just 1 week back out here.
Yeah.
What do we do, this group of folks from these particular reasons? How do we build psychology for our reasons?
The first thing I realized that if we have to start a new movement and anything new in the world, we have to create new vocabularies. And when communism came in is where we started hearing the word called the bourgeoisies and the proletariat. Or when Christianity came in is where we might have heard much more of terms like the devil and a whole lot of new terms. Look at the religion. I think we need to create new vocabularies. So one of the first things I did when I was starting FinalMile was to say that if we have to get out of the clutches of psychology, then don't speak about that word at all. And the reason we called our science behavior architecture was because that term never existed. Because we clearly said what we are doing is something new. And so create a completely new vocabulary around it. So that's the first thing I would do. The second is we should also have the guts and the confidence to say that what I was doing so far was all bullshit. And I had to say that the first 18 years of my life in the world of advertising, I was just bullshitting. I wasn't doing a great job at all. Now, it isn't easy. because what I was until then was launching Rexona Deo, launching Axe deodorant, launching, Reliance Infocom, possibly the biggest marketing spend in India. So there are a lot of my, what I was, my identity was based on what I did for 18 years. But the moment I said all that I did was completely bullshit, I was starting on, the starting line I had to build again. It's not easy, but we have to start something really new. We have to start anew. That'll be the second thing. Third is this new science is, especially neuroscience and behavioral economics, and as I said, all very expanding, fast expanding sciences with lots of. When I started looking at books on neuroscience about 20 years back, I used to get one book in a bookshelf. Today, I have hundreds of books on that, which means we have to be a very fast and a constant learner to adopt new learnings. So these are 1, 2, 3 significant steps, I would say, if we have to start a new revolution in human behavior management. I'm purposely not using the word psychology. We have to at least do these first 3 steps.
Newer vocabulary is something I'm sure everyone has made a note of out here, saying, all right, we've got to start a new movement, a new revolution. Why not use behavioral science itself to update and make behavioral science version 2? Why keep on getting ourselves anchored on the word from psychology and old theory? Let's create new vocabulary. We'll keep that in mind. And the second question, which I have, actually have a lot, but let me not get greedy. There are a lot more people out here, and I think we should all get our questions to you. Louise is going to help with the management. You don't have to worry at all about that.
Okay.
But the second question out here, again, it ties back to what you were speaking about earlier and to this point, which is opening up the mind, right? You say you find it easier to speak with the younger folks because they are more open. The beauty of a field like physics or maths is typically you cannot claim to know. Like if you know the first law of physics, law of inertia, you can't go out to someone and say, hey man, I understand physics because I've studied the first law of physics. And then you'll say, well, that's exactly what you know, the first law. There are 2 more laws of physics. Then there's thermodynamics, magnetism, there's relativity, there's quantum mechanics, XYZ, string theory, and then there's a whole singularity. But the beauty of social sciences is all it takes for us is to just take a look at this phrase saying the human mind is irrational. And that phrase is good enough for me to run with it and say, oh, I think I understand the behavioral sciences. I understand the human mind, which is very good and very bad at the same time because the bar is quite low, the interest is generated, but it backfires in the sense most of the time we are working with people who have to make decisions about money, about projects, right? And you're working with this entire group of folks, which we do. How have you handled this particular situation of the whole circle of competence, behavioral science feeling almost like, I think that's something my grandma knows too, grandmother's wisdom. And where is the balance? How much of a truth lies out there? Is this intuition? Have there been cases where obvious common sense understanding have totally backfired? How do you tread that line with people who are not necessarily students? And what can we do as practitioners out here and aspiring practitioners? Biju?
Actually, one of the most interesting paradoxes of introducing this new behavioral science in India was that a lot of people would have said, since I worked with a lot of professional companies run by MBAs, they'll be the first to accept this new knowledge. But I can tell you from my experience, no. And I purposely didn't go to them. My first client was an entrepreneur from Baroda, and now he's a very big company called RR Cables. Gopalji was a normal entrepreneur. Why? And and later I can talk about a lot of other entrepreneurs in India who Jyoti Laboratories, Imami. These are all people who initially gave us business. But what did I tell them? I knew what an entrepreneur is looking for. I also knew what was the fault with the existing advertising agencies and consultants, that they were not focused on the final mile. We called our company Final Mile because we said, hold us responsible for the final mile of brand building, which is sales. So we first time when we walked into the client, you said, we will make sure that sales happen. If not happens, we will give the money back to you. And we kept a large part of our fee. Initially, we said, we will take that money only if we manage to show results to you. Now you go and speak that language to an entrepreneur. Now he's the man who really understands the value of money. Because when a professional manager takes, say $1 from his pocket and gives you, he's taking that money not from his pocket, he's taking it from his annual budget and giving it to you. Many times professional managers are pulled up for not finishing his budget. But when an entrepreneur gives you $1, he's actually taking it from his wallet and giving it to you. He really feels, that $1. And I worked with Reliance, and I know, they are the richest people in the world. But I knew one thing. The question when they give me 1 rupee was, Biju, how much will you give me? Will you give me 1 rupee 5 paise, or will you give me 1 rupee 10 paise back to me? Will you give me results? And to them, if I tell them that I will give you results because this new science is very interesting, he's not interested in the science. All that he's interested in is, looking at the measuring of the results. So don't sell science to these people. Tell them that we can achieve results. And I think over the last 15 years, we have done hundreds of projects across the world. And I can tell each of those projects, and I can tell you that, yes, we have delivered measurable behavior changes. And that's why clients are very, very happy with us. And that's why we also could demand, one of the highest fees as any consultant in the world. And that's the way we go and sell a new science to people. Don't sell science to them. Sell them what the science can do for them, which is nothing but, improve their sales or improve. And later on, we realize other behavior changes make that happen. And then the world believes your science and other things.
That's a fantastic approach, as opposed to selling knowledge, or as opposed to doing a battle of wits, where possibly ego can come into a picture. Why not simply bring in simple ROI and say, this is how things
No, I used to walk into the client, and especially I don't want to mention names. I can say, for example, Godrej. When I said, I asked only one question to Tanya. I said, Tanya, which is your biggest problem? Where the awareness of the brand is the highest, but we call the awareness action gap, but the sales is the lowest. Give me your toughest human behavior problem. And that's what I used to ask for. And then we will work on it. Don't give me the difficult. Give me your toughest problem. Even with railways issue, we said, which is your biggest accident spot in Mumbai? They said it is Wadala. Okay, now we'll take Wadala. I think that gives you a lot of confidence on the other side in what we are speaking. And to me, that's it has always worked. And I know it will always, it has worked in the past. I know it will definitely work in the future too.
Thank you so much, Biju. And I have a lot more questions, but I know some people who have come in today specifically to listen to you. There's VM out here from KSA, and I'm really, really happy she's here. The people who's it's almost midnight for them right now in Indonesia, and they're here to listen to you. I think I'm going to cede the mic. Luis, please help us with the Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Prakash. Thanks, Biju. And Biju, just to let you know that there were loads of messages when you were talking about the sharing of ideas from reading the books in your office. Everyone just absolutely loved the idea about being somewhere at work where you can just talk about books. I know that's not all you talk about, but and other practitioners absolutely agreeing with you, practical examples, not the science. And I heard Nuala talking on her podcast, on a podcast in the week, and it's got to be practical examples that people can really relate to, not just what I've read about in a book. I think I saw Prakash commenting about a world map. I'm just going to spin my camera around. Can everyone see the new map I've put up behind me? Oh my God, it's taken up the whole wall. That's so that I know where you all are. And some great questions coming up. And I want to go over to Andy if he'd like to ask his question. Andy Hoary, you had a good question about increasing sales in advertising. Would you like to ask your question, Andy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because I was thinking about if you'd read some of the work from Les Burnett and Peter Field, and I was thinking one in particular was the long and the short of it, because you were talking about advertising and the sales and stuff like this, and I just wondered if you'd read that and if you'd applied it in any way, some of the learnings from it.
We have we worked a lot of across a lot of CPG companies. We have done work. I think one of the most important things. Maybe I'll have to also explain. There are 4 new thought process on which all our practices actually are resting on. One is, which we take from neuroscience, that 99% of and 99.9999% of human behavior is non-conscious, which has actually forced us also to then develop a new market research technique. The second is again work of Antonio Damasio, saying that emotions and rationality are not two separate things, they are together. For that matter, all human behavior, actually emotions are involved. And the third is the importance, obviously, of heuristics, which we know about it. And then the fourth was a very important thing, which is the role of context in human behavior. So all our research and all our interventions are always in context. So we believe if we have to really change behavior, we have to be at the point of action. So one of the things FinalMile in the last 15 years has never done, and we will never do in future, is to make a 30-second commercial. Because a 30-second commercial is far away, both temporarily and physically, from the point of action as far as branding is concerned, because the brand decisions are happening at the shelf. So all the work, interventions that FinalMile has done across projects has been at the point of action. And so let me, that's the first thing I'd like to mention to you as far as our approach to not just CPG, but overall about any behavior change project. Let me talk about one brand of ice cream for which we did some work. One of the things we realized, the client told us that, okay, in the supermarkets, we could see a lot of people even coming towards our counters, but actually they're moving away. So we obviously did a lot of ethnographic work and our research, part of the initial part of it. And we could actually see the kids are pulling the parents to the ice cream counters. The parents are sort of moving away. So we have a research methodology called EthnoLab, which is a combination of ethnography and gamification and other things, which is one of the very unique research methodologies. And that research methodology allows us to put people in decision-making mode and also allows us to get deep into the non-conscious of the people. And that does not come out in our focus groups and other research methodologies. So while we deployed the EthnoLab, we realized that there are some very hidden, what we call, emotions and, emotional memories in people. And so obviously we realized that at a conscious level, they said, yeah, ice creams, too many calories, it affects the health, it is not good. So a lot of those things were done. But we said, let's go below the consciousness and see what the deeper things are. And we said, are there any, positive relationships the people have with ice creams? And we realized, yes, all these adults who are in their 30s and 40s, they all have still memories of when they were children, when they were 5 years and 6 years and 7 years. Now this I'm talking about India. And they all said, when, when we played ting, 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 the sound of the ice cream vendor, ringing that particular bell, a lot of adults said, oh yeah, I still remember, pleading with my mother, pleading, please buy this ice cream for me. So we realized that deep inside in people's mind, that ting, ting, ting is still creating a lot of older memories. And what we did at the supermarket was, along the ice cream counter, we just played that sound again and again. And we found a 55% increase in sales happening because of that. And more. So there are multiple of our this one where we have actually done point of action intervention. That's always our way, and has definitely increased the sales of brands.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that ding ding you were saying, it's similar to like a brand code, people call them, or like an asset, or even a jingle as well. So I think that's interesting to use those things that then in your memory it brings it to the forefront, and then you have an association.
Yeah.
Like that.
There's a work by Joseph Ledoux on emotional memories, and I think we used that work especially in this particular project.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Great question. Now I'm going to bring in Gaurav. Biju, super fan Gaurav, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks. Biju's pleasure to meet you after 10 years. I was the guy you in XLRI. So, Biju, quickly, when you were talking about how most of the money spent towards advertisement you felt was not being utilized properly. I've spent 10 years in human resources, and I have same feeling when it comes to changing employee behavior. And coming to spend on training and development, those weekend trainings which happens. Have you, in your experience, have you seen any company using behavior science at workplace to increase employee productivity or something of that sort? Any books around it, theory?
We ourselves have done multiple projects. For example, one of the largest insurance company in India came to us and said they have almost about 15,000 friends. These are guys who work, for maximum, 6-8, but make as many sales as possible, collect the commission, and then move on to the next company, and then move on. But while doing it, they were giving lots of false promises and the wrong promises to the customers. And a few years later, these customers go back to the company and they said, look, we were told. And the company was facing, hundreds of crores of, loss because, these mis-selling was happening. And the CEO, who obviously heard of some of the work we do, called and asked me and said, can we inculcate integrity among these people? And the first thing, within the organization, people said it's impossible because all these guys are leaving in 6 months. But I think when we did the Ethno Lab, very interesting thing we found that 98% or 99% of the people, and this we have found across even girl trafficking and some of the other even more intense problems, 99% of the people are very good people. So we realize all these people who walk into this particular company are honest, nice people. But they enter into the company, they just look around to see what's happening, what's the norms of the organization. And we found that they said, oh, everyone in the organization does this. And one of the insights we found in that organization was that people said, I know it's illegal, but this is not immoral. So it's okay, we can do it. Say, assume there are 18 signatures to be put, one signature is forgotten, and then he calls the customer and says, sir, your signature is not there. The customer says, no, I am away. I am not going to be there for 7 days. You, kuch karo. I'm sorry for the others. Do something, which means you can forge that. Now, when things don't work, he'll remind the company saying, that signature on that page is not mine. But that's a different thing. But here, the salesperson said, this is customer service. The customer told me to do that. Now, in that process, we said, how do we bring in integrity? So, I should mention that the best practitioners of behavioral science in the world is not FinalMile or any other organization. The best practitioners of behavioral science in the world is the organized religion, the armies across the world, the terrorist organizations. These are some of the people who've been practicing the science for some of them for thousands of years. So when this company was asking, I asked this CEO, do you have a Sunday mass? He said, Biju, what do you mean? Like, don't impose your thinking onto me. I said, no. There is a science behind why Christians meet every week. On a Sunday, Jews meet on a Saturday, and the Muslims meet on a Friday. It's part of creating an organization. And the other religions don't meet, are not as organized as the religions that meet. So I said, if you have to create an organization, you have to create a Sunday Mass. So we created a Sunday Mass. And then one of the work is a very good work by Elliot Fishback of Chicago Booth. And she had, her work had said that if you want to reduce temptation or make sure people don't fall into a temptation, discuss those temptations more often. And that's what religions do. Any religious discourse you go, they were actually telling you, no, this. So how did we do a discussion? So we organized a Sunday Mass equivalent, which is every fortnight there was a meeting. And then we said, okay, now how do we, what is the competition up to? Obviously, sir, they're doing a lot of things, so let's write down what they do. So they do this, they do that, they do this. Okay. Are we going to do it? No, we are an honest organization. Then we said the leader takes that, he was asked to take it, crumble that paper and put it and say, we are not going to do it. Now, where did I learn from? The Indian traditions have taken all the bad things, taken onto a pumpkin, and the pumpkin has been thrown out of the house. It's a ritual. So we created such rituals in the organization, and we found that there was almost 75 to 80% reduction in their integrity-related cases. Rituals is what I would ask an organization to do. Another organization came to us because the stress levels had just shot up. It's a publishing house. We again introduce similar things around there. So, plaques and, a lot of those things being pasted on the walls are not good enough. But if we can create such rituals within organization, we can change the behaviors of the people within organization. That's what organized religion does. So I'm a big student of trying to unearth the science behind each of the rituals of all organizations, and then try to deploy it back into normal organizations.
Thanks very much, Gaurav, and thanks, Biju. And the direction the conversation has gone in is very apt. We've got Shubham here now, wants to ask a question to do with well-being. Would you like to go ahead, Shubham?
Yeah. Hi, Biju. So my question is regarding personal well-being. Yeah. A lot of the research that we get to read about are generally regarding behaviors of individuals in groups in specific contexts, like the workplace and stuff like that. But most of the literature around your own personal well-being at home, right, on a constant basis, is mostly directed towards habit formation, like a pure trigger, response, reward sort of thing. Have you actually, in your experience, applied any behavioral economics into personal well-being and seen any results? Or is it even possible for that matter?
Very much. I think there's one project we did that was actually possibly one of the largest behavior change projects in the world, which is the Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana program, where 222 million people had opened a new bank account. And the Ministry of Finance knew that the people, it's very easy to get them to open a bank account, but get these people to transact with the bank on a regular basis, which is what you would possibly call an individual behavior, would be difficult. So we were asked to study that particular behavior. But one of the most interesting ones that specifically I know you're speaking about, just development of awareness, we've done a lot of work in the area of education, EdTech. And because this one company gave us that project, but they're also the funders for a lot of EdTech companies, almost 23 EdTech companies around the world. So, education is, Coursera, and most of us would be knowing about it. There's a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning. I want to develop myself, constant learning. That's all very great, wonderful. So we joined. And we know by the time, a few weeks down the line, the number of people who finally finish that course is in single digit. So there is a huge problem where there is a lot of intention, but the intention does not translate into action. So we studied this particular problem, and we looked at it and said, how is it that using our understanding of commitment, for example, our understanding of setting goals, for example, we can actually improve the maintaining or sustaining the behavior for a longer time. And we have found very good results in getting people to learn on a far more better than what it is. The similar can be done for exercises, similar can be done for savings behavior. So it is very much possible for us to work on habit formation at an individual level. And so I'm very confident that behavioral sciences can be used for achieving that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Biju. Now, I'd like to bring in Rian. You have a question on organizational change. Would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thank you. So you recently spoke to us about creating rituals within an organization to ensure that everyone's moving towards one direction. And a lot of the research that we read is about increased productivity. I'm more interested in ensuring that a team of employees all exhibit several behaviors at once, especially when there's a merger and acquisition. So I'm wondering if you can share with us an experience, potentially yours with Fractal, when there was a merger between your two entities, and what you had done to ensure that there was the positive organizational change that you're looking for.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. I think M&As are again where failure rates are 90%. And even when Fractal and FinalMile was coming together, Srikanth, who was the group CEO, and I was fully aware that it's not going to be easy even for, it's very easy to speak theory like what I'm doing today, but it's not going to be easy to make that happen. And we also worked on another large multinational financial firm and an Indian firm merged. And we were again asked to work on bringing in both the cultures of both and integrating it there. So we've done at least our own project and our, obviously this particular project. You're right. It is a much more complex because it's not about one behavior, and it is a larger set of things. So it did involve more multiple things around it. It also involved multiple rituals to be created. And that's what we did. And I think we did, find that we've been successful in achieving that. So we had to do multiple things, and it was a fairly complex one. It is, there's no doubt about it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ian. Now, Shrutin, you had a question you wanted to put to Biju.
Hi, Biju. Always a delight to hear you talk. This was more of a thought, actually. The bit where you mentioned, to create new fields, develop a new vocabulary. I thought I was just trying to draw parallels with the quality revolution, right, from the 60s, 70s, and so on. I was just wondering, so smartphones kind of proved that we didn't become more efficient as human beings or more punctual. So I was wondering whether the quality revolution, in a way, may have been our way of learning how to make our machines more efficient. And probably right now with project management and software development, maybe it's a similar trend in terms of maybe teaching our AI how to develop better programs for us. So it's just a thought that I wanted to share in terms of so what you mentioned, create new vocabulary. I thought so some of these may or may not seem like the quality revolution, right? So we didn't really as humans become more process efficient or something, but then we made more efficient machines and systems and so on. Just wanted your thoughts on where do you see this blend of automation and AI and the relevance of human beings, maybe in the next 10 years?
I think a very interesting question. And as part of Fractal, because we do a lot of work in the area of AI and really, right. And I strongly believe more and more of the routine work that human beings are doing will move to the machines, because data, and that data will move into, it's far easier to achieve deep learning in algorithms we can create around it, and it will move, and is already moving and will continue to move. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure I think not last year, 2020, one of the best books to come out was No Work by, I just forget his name, a brilliant book. I strongly think it was shortlisted by McKinsey and Financial Times and all that. And that book was clearly speaking about how the AI is taking over most of the routine jobs. For example, Fractal has developed one of our offshoots of, one of the companies been groomed by Fractal called Cure.ai, has said they have actually studied almost 10 million X-rays, chest X-rays. Okay. And now the algorithm that Cure has created can actually detect TB far better than what a radiologist can do. Now, why should a radiologist, obviously, now, I'm not saying that we don't have a relevance for radiologists alone, but that's going to happen across a lot of those sectors. Okay. And I think it also then calls into saying that what are the jobs wherein human beings actually would be involved in. And that is where I think creativity, where I think a lot of soft touch and a lot of those care and other jobs, those are all jobs where human beings will still be required, because the machines might not be in a position to achieve that. But there is a thought process by saying that humans might not have to work as hard as what they were working, because the machines will do that particular job. So right from, earlier we used to take things with the hand and lift things around. But the moment a crane could do it, now crane can do that job far better. Much more heavier things can be lifted. Same is with the telescope. Earlier I could see so many, but when a telescope came in, okay, I could see a bit more farther. The radio telescope came in, I could go even farther with that. So I think machines are required. It will only make us better and better and do things far more efficiently. Right. That means that humans, we will have to identify jobs where we are really required. And to me, jobs that require a lot of creativity and innovations will still be some of the predominant jobs where humans would be involved in. The routine jobs will go to the machines, and AI will take over those routine jobs.
Right. Perfect. I just think it's a matter of concern, at least for India, given our population, and we're slated to be the youngest population and the largest, right? So
I think, agriculture, there was a time when 100% of the population of any country was involved in agriculture. Then when the Industrial Revolution came in, so there is that, So there is that moment. There will always be set of people who are not able to move with the times or move to a new job. There will be pain for them. But then, the newer generation will know, okay, that's not what I should do. So like today, it'll be very, a lot of people in the rural areas said, no, I don't want to be, even the parents says, I don't want my children to be working in the farms. I want them to study so that they can get a job in the city and go on. So there will be transitions, and people will move into those new jobs or new opportunities that would come up. So I'll see the transition, and the world has always transitioned, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that it would also create pain for people who get caught in between. Right. Because the machine came in and they lost the job in the factory. Now they're in their 50s. They can't now learn anything new. Now they're without a job. I agree. It's painful for them. But then those are some of the realities of these transitioning happening.
Right. Thanks so much, Biju.
Thank you. Thanks. I don't know if you would mind staying with us just for a little bit longer, Biju. We've got stacks of questions.
No, I always, not a
You're very kind. I'm aware of everybody else. You're committing your time to us, obviously, on a Saturday. I'm going to hand over to Priyanka there now, has a question, and we might just be able to get one or two more questions after Priyanka.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi. So,
hi, Priyanka.
My question is that we talk about neuroscience, that's like post-big data, now there's computational neuroscience. But regarding the brain, there are few theories now. One says the brain is like malleable, and like over the years, even if it's traumatized, the brain can figure itself out and come back. There's brain plasticity and flexibility. And there's the other thought which says that if you've gone through repetitive trauma or just basically life context itself, not only shapes not just the wiring patterns, but also the brain shapes, which means each brain has the possibility of being unique and subjective, just like each person has that. So now how would you integrate computational neuroscience, context subjectivity, emotional subjectivity, person subjectivity on application in like marketing? Like, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Priyanka, I think we are very, very, very far away from solving all the complexities about the brain. So much so there is a belief that it is the most complex system in the world, and the human brain will never be able to understand the functioning of the human brain is entirely. So what I would actually say is, instead of seeing where, we still don't know, but I think with already in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a lot of new understanding that has come in about human behavior from of neuroscience. Use that to make a difference to how we build brands, how we solve some of the problems like road accidents and all the other problems that I'm talking about. So there would still be contradictions and still lots of unknowns about the brain. I hope the neuroscientists will continue, and I know a lot of work is happening. Hopefully they will write more papers, and as long as we continue to read those papers, possibly we'll have some answers. But I think with already some of the good work that has happened in neuroscience, I think there is a lot for us to apply that. And I think once we apply it, as we have seen in the last 15 years, we get very good results as compared to the traditional psychology theory-based practice.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Vijay. Thank you, Priyanka. Enthusiastic as always. You sort of bring us back to life at the end of the meeting conversation. And so we're getting close to wrapping up here now. And what I'd just like to ask you as a sort of closing shot, Biju, is we touched on the subject at the start of the event about trying to make voices more representative. Obviously, you've been in the industry a long time, so you've seen lots of change. What would you say is the change that you're seeing most readily now on the ground in behavioral science?
As I said, I've seen lots of interesting, like even behavioral science, a lot of people speak about behavioral economics. But for example, for me, there's a lot of very interesting work by Gerd Gegrenzer of Max Planck Institute, for example, wherein he talks about, how the heuristics are actually what he calls the smart heuristics. So there's a lot of interesting work happening around there. And what I have seen is that this combination of having a multidisciplinary approach to dealing with human behavior is really becoming stronger and stronger. Instead of just only using one science and saying, okay, I have all the solutions. So that's one of the things that I'm really seeing in the application of this particular science. And two, we are also getting into looking at a lot of complex problems. For example, my own team works on HIV reduction in Africa, and we've done multiple projects. And Gates Foundation is very happy with the work that we have done. And I think we are managing to now really go, to get into such complex issues. And that means behavioral science, the new way we're looking at it, can play a very significant role in policy making. So I'm very, very optimistic about the future of behavioral science in the world.
That's fantastic, Biju. It's great to finish on a high note. And so I'd just personally like to thank you for joining us today. It's been fantastic to hear all of your very practical comments, lovely, rather than sort of the theoretical. It's lovely to hear about the practice on the ground. And so just to iterate to everybody what I said earlier, that there'll be some posts in the thread in the week about tiny habits. Try and engage in some conversation about that, be great. And to tell you all that next week we'll be joined by Raphael March. She's Chief Design Officer at Carey Consulting. And I think it'll be really interesting because she's a young person in behavioral science who came to Carey with very little experience from just working in advertising a short time. She has a degree in the subject, but I think it'd be really great for us to hear her story of how young people are moving up in the industry these days. So hopefully she'll have some really interesting stories to tell us. So I'm going to hand back now to Prakash to close the event, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you all for all those fantastic questions, staying late up on a Saturday night. I just made, if Biju speaks, I'll make notes, right? So yeah, I've made my notes. Before we go, for the students, all right, for the students, for people who are curious about this science, study your books. If the company itself had a mandate of spending 50% of their time on reading books, and today, after being this huge, they still spend their Monday second half reading books and discussing those insights, I think we should be humble enough to say, okay, we'll keep on reading those books. But don't stop at just the books, is what Biju is saying. He's saying, why don't you go and study something more? Study religion. Study groupies, and understand how do you have rock stars having that kind of hold on people. And to people who are practitioners of the field, Biju is saying two things. Don't sell your science. Sell the possible solution to the client, because your science doesn't care if you're using science, your client doesn't care if you're using science or if you're using voodoo and black magic. He simply wants the problem, he or she wants the problem gone. So do not wax eloquent about what you know about behavioral science and how it is going to change the world. Instead, simply saying, dude, give me the toughest problem that you have, not the difficult, the toughest problem. And to the marketeers, Biju is saying, try to solve the problem at the point of action. At the point of action. I think we'll keep these three things in mind. I'm sure Lou's going to write a fantastic post about it. Biju, with your permission, we're going to upload this video sometime very soon, within this week's time. And thank you very much for helping us understand this science. Back to you, Biju.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for listening and asking all the interesting questions. I learn every time I discuss things with, things become even more clearer in my head every time I discuss it. Thank you, Prakash. Thank you, Louis, for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
And good night.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Sit up high, Prakash. Everyone wants to see your T-shirt.
All right. This is Bruce Lee, one of my biggest idols. I take a lot of his advice because I find him very multidisciplinary every time he talks. Because he was one of the original martial artists who took up boxing, and he said, let me not just do useless kicks, let me watch the swordsmen, how they're doing fencing. He would rewind videos of Muhammad Ali just to see how his feet are moving, right?
Yeah.
And then he would do weight training, which is unheard of, right? He would experiment a lot, and he was very unorthodox that way. So he was not following dogma at all, and I think it helps us a lot, especially us in a field where like, oh, psychology is the biggest thing, and someone else will say, social psychology is the way, and then someone takes a degree in behavioral economics and like, behavioral economics is the right way to save the world, right? So we evangelize our own chosen field a lot, and then when you look at someone like Bruce Lee, you realize, okay, maybe it makes sense taking the best of all the world and create a Jeet Kune Do of your own. So I like his philosophy a lot. But the star out here is Biju. Thank you so much, Biju.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, Louise.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Prakash.
That's for
Bye.
Kat. That's for Kat before you go, Kat.